It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Joining me today is my guest, Bobbie Foedisch. Bobbie is founding partner and chief selling officer at All About Leverage, a Philadelphia-based social selling and door opening firm. Bobbie, welcome to Accelerate.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Andy.
Well, we're excited to have you. So take a minute, please. Introduce yourself. Maybe tell us how you got your start in sales.
Sure, absolutely. You know, I've actually reinvented myself a number of times. So it sounds all unrelated, but it's all so related to how I ended up here.
Oh, good. Well, let's hear it.
So I originally was in operations in restaurants on the main line and in Philadelphia, and I did that for 10 years. I ran 5 restaurants between $2 and $15 million.
What type of restaurants?
They were actually it was a single owner who owned multiple types of concepts. So there was an Italian, there was a Mediterranean, there was a Spanish. We had an American restaurant, and then a high-end pizza restaurant. So there was actually a number of different types of food and different types of staff, and it was all up and down the same area outside of Philadelphia on the main line. It was actually a pretty crazy time. You learn a lot in the restaurant business. I mean, a whole lot.
And so, director of operations, you were in charge of what?
Pretty much everything. Yeah, sales and marketing, and hiring and termination, and developing the wine and beer lists, the alcohol lists, working with the chefs on the menus, and training programs. It was literally, if you had the 10,000-foot view of the restaurant, it was having your hands in all of the different pieces of it. So I learned how to run a B2C business doing that. And that was about 10 years. So it was a long time.
Yeah. So then how'd that lead you to sales?
Well, actually, that led me to retail, where I was an operations manager for a big box retailer for the next 5 years, just trying to get a better schedule. And then once I realized that it wasn't a better schedule, just a shifted schedule, I went into literally took a large pay cut, about 6 figures, and I took the only job that somebody would hire me for without sales experience. So a woman hired me to work out of her basement. She worked out of her house and had maybe 3 or 4 employees at the time. The only reason she hired me is because I told her I was okay with earning. So she didn't have to pay me. I would just earn commission. Only. Right.
So what were you selling?
Training. So that actually worked out well. I was selling training for the food service industry, food safety training, and alcohol safety training for restaurants and bars and schools and hospitals, etc. So it was a nice transition since I already had knowledge of the industries. And I told her I would only be there for 2 years. I was just trying to break into a new industry. I wanted to learn how to sell. This was back in the cold calling days. So she brought me in.
You say that like you think cold calling is no longer done.
Well, it shouldn't be done anymore, but we'll get into that in a second.
Okay, so?
Well, so, the goal was I was going to help her get up out of her basement and help increase sales and turn it into a real viable business, since that's where my expertise was, and she was going to teach me how to cold call. So she did. And then, just like I told her, 2 years and 1 day later, I left and hung my first shingle, which was a franchise of voluntary benefits for small to mid-sized companies. And I did that for the next 2 years, where I developed this social selling process that we teach people. So back before social selling was even a real word.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. It was before it was a thing. So, I hung my first shingle, My husband and I ran the business together. I did the cold calling thing. I did the foot canvassing thing. I did the networking thing. I was pretty bad at the networking thing. And then I figured out that I was doing that wrong. So I went to a chamber event where I saw a woman speak about LinkedIn. And I said to my husband and business partner at that time, I said, I think I'm going to try social media. And at that point, I wasn't on social media at all.
So do you remember who you saw speaking?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I wish I had. Today, had I known the impact from then, I'm sure I would have developed a relationship and started up a dialogue. But, I guess back then it was just kind of more of a cold calling type of thing where you see somebody once and you don't really think past that.
So who are you cold calling?
Who am I cold calling?
Who were you cold calling at the time when you started your own?
Oh, on small to mid-sized businesses. So the business owners and the the CFOs of companies up to 500 employees. So anywhere from 10 to 500 employees. Got it. That's what I was targeting. And then when I heard somebody do a quick 10-minute speech on LinkedIn at the chamber event, that's when I said to my husband, I'm going to try social media. And he thought I was crazy. He said, neither one of us were on social media at the time. We didn't grow up in the time frame where you would have been on social media on a regular basis. It was kind of out of our wheelhouse, and our idea of social media was posting pictures of your children and your cat and your dog and
on
Facebook,
the food.
Right, yeah. So after him telling me I was crazy, I went ahead and did it anyway, opened up a LinkedIn profile. It was probably the worst profile anybody had at that time. Started pressing all the buttons and figuring things out, and did a lot of stuff wrong. In fact, I probably broke just about every single rule because I didn't know what I was doing, which is what I find is the case most of the time, is that people just don't know. So once I worked through it, a couple of years in, I developed a process where I organically integrated social media activity into my daily routine. And before you knew it, I had a full-out process that was driving sales to me on a regular basis. And I, for the most part, didn't have to prospect anymore other than speaking engagements and things like that. But, the knocking on doors was done and the cold calling was over, and the random networking, I just pushed that to the wayside. And I started just really building my network digitally and in person in conjunction with each other, opening more doors and booking out 6 weeks at a time for initial meetings. And, then I thought, well, at some point it's got to slow down. And I'll tell you what, Andy, it hasn't slowed down since. So on a regular basis, the way that we've built this program, we constantly have people reaching out to us based on what we're putting out there through social. So it literally changed the way that we do business. Then at some point, I was still in the benefits business. At some point, I guess it was, 2 years in, my husband and I were driving down to D.C. to go visit family. And I said to him, I think we're doing the wrong business. I think we should take the leap and hang this shingle. Let's teach people what we do. Let's show them how to impact their sales and fill their funnel and have higher conversion rates and higher retention. And so we did. And 2.5 years ago, we launched All About Leverage. We've been cash flow positive since day one. We have an incredible network of folks. I get to travel and help people every day and show them how we did it.
Okay,
That's how I got there.
Yeah, exciting. So in a recent blog post, you asked the question, you posed the question, are you running a sales team the outdated way?
Yeah.
So let's sort of talk about that. So what's outdated in your mind? What's outdated?
Well, let me ask you something, Andy. Think about today versus even 20, 30 years ago, or even 5 years ago. The first time, I love this analogy, the first time you bought a car versus the last time you bought a car. And I'm going to directly relate the buying process to the disconnect in the sales process here. So the first time you bought a car, I imagine you went from lot to lot and spoke to the salesperson because they were the one with the information. You test drove everything. You asked opinions by other people in your family or your professional circles. It probably took you a couple of weeks to come to a decision as to what car to buy. There was no Google, there was no internet. You couldn't just search to find out information. You had to have those face-to-face conversations, and that was the easiest way to get the information. And then 2 weeks later, you bought the car. Well, the last time you bought a car, you probably sat on your couch and you Googled everything you needed to know, including which local lots had the car that you were interested in. You probably even scheduled a meeting right there from the site to come in and sign some paperwork. You went to the dealer. You were in there and out of there in 2 hours with the car that you wanted. So for us, we all automatically go online when we're interested in investing our money in something, whether it's a product or service. We Google everything. We go on and we check out results and recommendations and safety features, and we do it all online. We are 60-70% through the buying process before we ever even speak to a salesperson today.
Well, is that true in business to business as well?
Absolutely. When you're looking to bring in somebody that's maybe a new bookkeeper, or you need a legal assistance and you're recommended to speak with somebody, don't you go online and check them out?
Well, there's a lot of, I have to admit, this whole area of discussion about how far are, in the business to business space, how far are buyers through their buying process before they engage with sellers? Source a lot of controversy, because there are studies that come out that have substantiated both the yes and the no of that. Where a high fraction of customers, and especially in sort of complex B2B sales, really their buying process is initiated through contact from a salesperson, as opposed to something they've sort of developed awareness of on their own. Where on the other end of the spectrum, there's this 60 to 70% of the way through the process. So how do you begin to reconcile that?
Reconcile the multiple types of
opposing points of view in terms of where the buying process really starts.
Well, think about yourself. When you need something and you need to hire somebody for services, what do? What are your steps?
But are you saying that cold call? But I mean, there's whole vast segments of tech business, for instance, the SaaS space, that are being driven by cold calling, proactive outreach.
Right. And honestly, I actually work with a number of companies that still hold on to cold calling. In fact, we've worked cold calling into their daily routine. However, we turn it into a warm call by generating information from social media, which actually has proven in every case higher conversion rates. So I understand what you're saying in that a lot of industries still cold call. I honestly don't believe there are industries out there that couldn't benefit more from warm calling as opposed to cold calling. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that with the information highway available to us 24/7, that we actually have made our decision before we do speak to somebody that can help us with that product or service. I have no doubt about that at all, that rings true probably 90% of the time. So yeah, the studies are based on different litmus tests in different areas and different industries and different levels. I totally get that. But you have to agree that we are very digitally enabled and we can find anything out in a heartbeat anymore, whether it's services or products or when the next game is. Everything is literally at our fingertips with our smartphones.
So do you think that sales are guilty of ignoring how customers buy?
Yes. I think that ignoring is the wrong word. I think that they are unaware that the sales process that they are implementing doesn't match the buying process that they implement on a daily basis. So if you think about the way you buy versus the way you sell, and you make some changes to change your sales process to a more modern buying process, it's very digitally enabled. I'm not saying that the face-to-face is so important and having that conversation or the WebEx or the Skype call, or I mean, really it all leads up to that. But we have the ability at any time of any day to engage with our ideal client profiles on social media in an effort to warm them up before we ever get to the point where they're even a prospect, but where they're even really cross that line from suspect to prospect. We have the ability to do that at any time. And we're doing it on our own time, and they can answer on their own time. So it's much less invasive as well. I think it's a little bit more respectful to be able to give them the ability to contact me back if they want and when they want.
So you're saying that the old model of interrupt selling, basically, or interrupt-driven selling, falls into that outdated category. And there are people, very serious people, that will take both points of view on this, is that that isn't and isn't, and just sort of, you think it is, though.
I think I know I don't like to be interrupted. I don't. And honestly, if you call me and it's an interruption and I'm not prepared for the call, then I feel like it's a waste of my time and a waste of your time.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So good. So besides cold calling, what other sort of outdated sales practices do you encounter that sort of fall into this outdated concept?
Well, I think they're all very similar to cold calling. I think just knocking on doors and foot canvassing, while it can be very fruitful, is also an interruption that the decision maker may not be prepared for. I think the traditional random networking techniques can be very difficult unless you really understand how to work a room. And a lot of times folks are not trained appropriately, but you can leverage social selling and LinkedIn in order to determine who you're going to meet at any event before you ever get there and be more purposeful. You can leverage LinkedIn and social selling techniques to schedule the right timeframes with people. You can use it to really take out the guesswork and stop interrupting folks. But, honestly, the technology just allows us to do things faster. LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, or depending on what you're selling and where you are digitally, it allows us to locate people based on specific filters. If you're targeting maybe the C-suite of company size 500 to 5,000 within the Northeast or the West Coast, we have the ability to not only find those people, but find who knows those people that we know. We have the ability to leverage our relationships to get referrals and introductions to get into the door faster. We have the ability to narrow down who we want to target at networking events so that we can have 5 meaningful conversations in the room instead of trying to, what I call, cold call in the room, where you go around and talk to everybody to figure out who it makes sense to actually try and plant a seed with and establish a relationship with. It's really about executing more proficiently and saving time so that you have more time to work on relationships as opposed to finding the right people.
Well, I was going to ask, so much we're talking about is really sort of top of funnel issues. So what's happening in terms of how things are evolving, beneath the top of the funnel? I mean, how's it changing for middle of funnel sales, or how should it be changing? What are some of the old habits you're seeing that in your work with companies that are persisting once you get, the interest established with the prospect? What needs to change on that end? And how can social help with that, or can it?
Okay, I'm not 100% certain I understand the series of questions you asked. So I'm going to ask you.
I mean, what we're talking about is top of funnel, right? How do we get prospects? How do we get interest?
Sure.
But that's just one part of running a sales team. And you're saying, there's other, are you running a sales team in outdated fashion? I was just wondering what you see in your work with clients that once you get beyond that top of funnel, once you get somebody engaged and qualified, what are some of the outdated practices you're seeing that could be changed and maybe even influenced through use of social?
Okay. So you want to increase the conversion of prospect to client, and you want to know how social selling can help implement that change. Is that right?
Well, I'm just asking, what are you seeing in terms of what people are doing that's effective in that regard?
So what's been effective is actually staying in contact with them via social media based on content that they've disseminated. So starting conversations based on what they're interested in and staying in touch with them and staying in front of them without actually having to try and follow up on the proposal you sent, or trying to pitch a product or a service through social media, which is a big no-no. It allows you to engage with a prospect about the things they care about, earn their trust, and learn a little bit more about them, which is something that really wasn't viable 10 years ago. We now have the ability to establish at least the beginnings of a relationship by having conversations on social media. So you're talking about the conversion through warm lead generation, which, of course, we can talk about statistics and go back and forth about warm versus cold. But I honestly don't think anybody out there can argue that there's a lower conversion rate for cold lead generation versus warm lead generation. I mean, the average is 60% conversion when it's warm and 0.5% conversion when it's cold, or even if it's 50% conversion when warm and 10% conversion when it's cold, it's still a huge difference. So getting the prospect into the top of the funnel, warming them up through the middle of the funnel, that gives you higher conversion rates through the bottom. You're going to get more that drop through. And then being able to stay in touch with what they care about through social selling techniques, and being able to address any issues that maybe don't come up in your regular conversations, well, that helps with the longevity of the client. So it's about being able to stay in constant communication.
Yeah, so give me an example. You're saying you're talking about something, bringing up an issue that they care about. Engaging in conversations on issues that they care about.
Okay. So what I mean by that is looking at what they're talking about on social media. So not necessarily what you're talking about on social media, although that's fine, but what they care about, and engaging them in conversation on what they care about. So, for example, if you go onto anybody's LinkedIn profile, you have the ability to view all of their public activity on LinkedIn, meaning everything that they've posted, everything that they've commented on or liked, everything that they've engaged in, which is public on homepages or in groups or whatever it may be. Like, I'm looking at yours right now, and you just recently, 6 days ago, posted reducing your sales cycle, increasing your sales efficiency with Andy Paul. So in the interim of you going from suspect to prospect, and in the interim of you going from prospect to client, I can actually have conversations digitally with you through LinkedIn and talk to you about the things that you're posting about, and engaging you in conversation, asking questions, earning your respect before we ever get to the point where we're going from prospect to client. Does that make more sense?
So in that environment, let's say, there's, again, range of opinions in terms of what's the best practice. So, let's say you see a prospect that's posted something on LinkedIn. In your mind, what's the best practice for how to engage with them at that point?
Well, it's, you can like, comment, or share. And that's pretty much standard across social platforms.
Because there's some people that default right away to reaching out with an in-mail or something, which is doesn't seem like it's very effective. Or have you experienced that different?
No, in-mails are very ineffective because that is, for lack of a better description, that's a cold call. It means you had no other way to get in touch with that person, or didn't take enough time to understand how to get in touch with that person, that you had to do it cold. So of all the capabilities on LinkedIn, I just don't feel like anybody should ever have to use an in-mail. And I've only ever used one. Used an in-mail once in the entire time I've been on LinkedIn, and it was actually a warm in-mail. And it was 10 people had recommended I speak to this one woman, and so that's what I put in the headline and sent her the information, and we scheduled a call through the in-mail. But that was the only time, and it was just because it was the easiest thing to do. But I don't believe in-mails are the most effective way. First of all, when you engage on public content, then you're actually maximizing not only your visibility, but their visibility, and you have the ability to bring other people into the conversations. So, for example, your most recent post, if I think it would be effective for somebody in my network to read it, I can pull in their name in the comment section, bring them into the conversation, at the same time effectively introducing the two of you and providing content that they desperately need. So I'm doing a number of things there. I'm maximizing my visibility to your network, my network, and their network. I'm bringing them to you, and you're bringing you to them. I'm solving an issue, and I'm making a referral. And I can do that all publicly.
Mm-hmm. No, very clever. I mean, so one of the things that's sort of last question on the LinkedIn thing that
Sure.
seems to be a best practice issue, which is that salespeople have a hard time sort of defining when it's okay to take that step beyond sharing, commenting, and so on to actually contacting.
Yes. So there's no set rule for this. There really isn't. This is a process. Sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes it's, as soon as you've commented, they reach out to you and ask you to connect. Other times you comment and you ask questions and you try to engage them in conversation and they don't respond. At which point you're going to want to do that, probably 2 times a week. You're going to go in and try and engage them in conversation for a couple of weeks until it does elicit a response.
Well, engage in conversation meaning through comments or sharing on their content.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So once you do earn their respect and you earn their attention, that's when you can go ahead and reach out with the connection request. Then you're notified of the connection request. Now they've accepted you into their network. Now it's time to reach out and ask for that one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right, well, good. We're going to take a short break. I'll be right back with my guest, Bobbie Foedisch. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Okay, welcome back. Talking to my guest today, Bobbie Foedisch. We're going to be talking about best practices on really prospecting. How to use social to help you prospect and avoid turning your cold calls into warm calls. And so now moving to the last segment of the show, I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests.
Sure.
And the first one is a hypothetical scenario.
Okay.
In which you've just been hired as the new VP of sales at a company whose sales have sort of stalled out. And the CEO is anxious to get sales unstuck and back on track. And, we all know sales turnaround has to begin somewhere. But in this case, you're in charge. Now, what 2 things would you do your first week on the job that could have the biggest impact?
Oh, that is a loaded question. Only 2 things that I would do to have the biggest impact. Well, I would imagine being new to the position, I would have to learn about each of the sales folks' capabilities and what they currently do to bring in new business or what they're currently not doing. I imagine a lot of it would have to be either outdated or they would just not have a right process in place or maybe just not the right structure. So determining where each of them is falling short and then implementing process changes based on where they're falling short. That would have to be, an assessment would have to be done before anything else was implemented. Mm-hmm. But from there, I would go back to the basics. I mean, basics.
Such as?
Who's in your network and who's reliable and who do you have that are referral partners and do you not understand what that means and how do we build off of referral partners and what can we do to drive more prospects to us. So really starting with their actual network and I don't mean a LinkedIn network and I don't mean a Twitter network. I mean your real business network because a lot of times I find that a lot is available to us as salespeople. But in order to get a referral, there are 2 things that you can do to help maximize client acquisition through referrals. And the top 2 things are 1, giving referrals. So are you not giving to your network? And 2, asking for referrals. So are you not asking for referrals?
Hard to get them if you don't ask.
Right, absolutely.
Exactly, yeah.
So just something that basic to implement before even getting into leveraging social media and social selling innovation and techniques that'll help build the pipeline and convert.
Okay. Good answer. So now some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
You can give one-word answers. You can elaborate if you wish. So when you, Bobbie, you are out selling your services, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
Speaking. I would say speaking.
Speaking. Okay. Meaning.
Absolutely. Whether it's one-on-one with somebody or in front of an audience of 500. I definitely think my biggest attribute is being able to engage 1 or 500 people in the content I'm speaking about.
Okay. Love it. Who's your sales role model?
My sales role model. I actually have a few. I'm going to give a shout out to a few folks in my network, and that's Scott Messer of Sales Evolution, Steve Kloida, the prospecting expert. I'm going to give a shout out to some of the top social media experts out there, like Coca Sexton from LinkedIn, who I don't have a relationship with, but would love to. I think he's amazing. And, I have a lot of local folks that I really find do it the right way that, help me kind of tweak my processes, even if they don't know it. But for the most part, I think that innovation is all around us.
It is. So next question then is, what's one book every salesperson should read?
Ooh, The Tipping Point. Absolutely.
By Malcolm Gladwell.
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely. I think that's excellent.
All right. Last question for you. What music's on your playlist these days?
Actually, I'm a big Motown girl, so I have a lot of Motown on there.
Nice.
But I listen to everything. I'll be quite honest with you. It depends on my mood. I think that's a better way to put it.
Okay, but Motown, that's good. We don't get many Motown answers, but I love that.
I imagine
think people are rediscovering Motown. I know my kids are of the generation that they really enjoy it.
Is it coming back around now?
Yeah, I think so. Which is good. Great to hear that. All right. Well, Bobbie, thanks for joining us, and tell folks how they can find out more about you.
Sure. So you can find out more about me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Bobbie Foedisch. You can follow me on Twitter at LinkedIn Bobbie. Our website is www.allaboutleveragellc.com. And let's see, if you go to any one of those, you'll be able to find a lot of other places where content and other podcasts and all kinds of information.
All right. Excellent. Good. Well, thank you again. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. An easy way to do that is to make this podcast accelerate a part of your daily routine, listening in your commute, in the gym, or as part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Bobbie Foedisch, who shared her expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. And until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.